Hey everybody, welcome to Far Out Dudes.
It's another week and we got another far out conversation for you.
I'm one of your hosts, Paul.
I'm Joseph.
And it's another week for something for us to give to you to listen to. What do you think, Joseph?
I think this one's going to be very interesting.
I think this is going to be interesting because if you thought the video of Kevin Ives and Don Henry, the two teenagers that saw a drug exchange happen, and you believe, or what's alleged to be a connection to the Clintons, then you'll want to hear the story of Vince Foster.
Yeah, this one's... It's a weird suicide route that he took is all I have to say.
Yeah. So his death, like Joseph said, was ruled a suicide. So who was Vince Foster? Vince Foster was, at the time of Bill Clinton's presidency, he was actually the deputy White House counsel. And actually Hillary and him were actually associates at a law firm in Arkansas before Bill became president. Mm-hmm. And so what we want to do is start you off with some of the nice reporting of Vincent Foster and what happened.
And they knew each other for a while then. It wasn't just, hey, he became president and then they got introduced. They'd known each other for a little while.
Yeah, so when so on our previous video, we stated and showed how Bill Clinton was the governor of Arkansas for a while. Well, at that time, while he was governor of Arkansas, Hillary Clinton and Vincent Foster were actually associates and friends. And what is possible as well is that they also had extramarital affairs together, Vincent Foster and Hillary Clinton. So.
Or Vincent Foster.
Yeah.
Must have been very desperate.
So probably. So Bill Clinton isn't the only one that's over there having some sexual escapades, you know?
It's just an open marriage, you know? They both had a little bit of fun, apparently.
Yeah, so they were actually just a nice, good home country marriage and family back in Arkansas.
Oh, yeah, they were.
Yeah.
To say the least.
So we want to start off with a clip that will kind of give you a little bit of rundown of the Vincent Foster and his suicide. So we want to give you the official reports and then show you a little bit of evidence of how it may have not necessarily been a suicide.
I don't understand how it wouldn't be. But I guess let's dig into that a little bit.
Let's dig into it again. So we're going to show you a video, give you a little bit of rundown.
And for everyone listening on the podcast, just audio, it's a pretty clear description. You don't necessarily have to see the video, but if you want to, I'll put a link in the description below for us.
The available evidence points clearly to suicide as the manner of death. That conclusion is based on the evidence gathered in the analyses performed during previous investigations, and the additional evidence gathered in analyses performed during the OIC investigation, including the evaluations of Dr. Lee, Dr. Blackburn, Dr. Berman, and the various OIC investigators.
So right there we see that it's clearly a suicide.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I mean, this guy literally it was a self-inflicted wound that led to death.
Especially in the little drawing there, he's just laying down with his hands to his side.
Yeah, it's so nice.
I know if I were to shoot myself, I would make sure my hands fall perfectly to the side.
And straight.
Not hold the gun.
Just straight. After I after I were to do that to myself, I would be holding the gun next to the side of me and not in some weird...
Given that you just shot your brains out and you instantly died.
And I think it's interesting that you point that out from just watching that thing, right? And then you just gave yourself a death blow, basically. Mm-hmm. And there's small splatters and a little bone chip.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you think you would find a little bit more than just a little piece?
No. It's obviously a suicide, especially with the what caliber was it? Wasn't it like a 38 special or something like that?
Yeah, it was a 38 caliber.
It's very, very clean shots from those guns.
Yeah.
Just it goes in, mixes the brain up, and you instantly die. You don't feel anything.
So here's something interesting about this whole entire situation. He was the deputy White House counsel for Bill Clinton. Mm-hmm. They've known each other in the past, right? Mm-hmm. The interesting part about his death, the day before he apparently did this to himself, Bill Clinton actually fired the director of FBI, Mr. Sessions. Were you aware of that?
I was not.
Yeah. Why would you fire an FBI agent
I don't know.
or the director? Well, mainly because if it was an apparent suicide, and if it looked at any
It would
at
have
all,
to be investigated.
it would have to be investigated even further, right?
Yes.
So what is the best thing to do? Get the head of the FBI to be let go, so that way he wouldn't look into the situation and incident a little further than anybody else would.
Yes. And that's just, but he was fired the day before. And so they're just like, by the books, clean. Hey, yesterday, we're not going to look into this anymore. It was just suicide, lock and key.
The other interesting part is Bill Clinton was actually probably one of the first ones to ever fire a director of the FBI.
Yeah. For what? Did it say what reason?
To be honest, I didn't look too far into it because I was just looking more into the Vincent Foster suicide and like what was going on. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't look into that. Maybe we can make another video or another episode of like showing like more escapades and more the exploits of Bill Clinton.
Yeah,
right.
Going a little more detail of the whys.
So now that we've gotten the official report on what happened to Vincent Foster, I think it'll be a good idea to see some of the other things that weren't included in these reports.
What could not be included? Everything was covered.
So the reason I brought up the FBI thing is because with the FBI being out of the whole situation,
good investigators, you mean?
Yes. So who ended up having to be in charge of the investigation?
Local police.
Local police and the park police. Because Vincent Foster's body, Mr. Foster's body, was found in the park. Okay. And so the initial report from the park police was this. On the evening of July 20th, 1993, the park police discovered the body of Vincent Foster in his car. So that was
not on the ground.
That was an official memo sent to the Secret Service, FBI, and federal agents of the Intelligence Division to let them know that the park police actually found his body in the car, not in the park.
Not laying down on
a hillside.
Little hillside, perfectly laid out.
Yeah. So that's the interesting part that we ended up finding out as well, is that the initial report from the park police who took over this investigation, his body was not found in the park hillside.
Which was probably from one of the first people to see him, like see his body and everything, right? Yeah. It wasn't like, oh, this is like hours after everyone's been notified, and these are like the second or third people to come in contact with him. These are the first people to see and find his body, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So these weren't I would say not the first ones, because there's obviously witnesses, which we'll get to a little bit later.
Yeah.
So there's actual civilian witnesses who saw a little bit of suspicious activity, right?
But I mean like officials, like investigators.
Yes, the official investigators were the first ones to come to the scene, and that's where they found his body. Non-civilians, yes. Let's hear a little bit more what the unofficial reports of what happened to Vincent Foster. And what this video is going to do is actually show you a little bit more evidence and some of the first witnesses to come forward on what happened.
On July 20th, 1993, 6 months to the day after Bill Clinton took office as President of the United States, the White House Deputy Counsel, Vincent Foster, told his secretary, Deborah Gorham, "I'll be right back." He then walked out of his office after offering his coworker Linda Tripp the leftover M&Ms from his lunch tray. That was the last time Vincent Foster was seen alive. Contrary to the White House spin, Vincent Foster's connections to the Clintons was primarily via Hillary rather than Bill. Vincent and Hillary had been partners together at the Rose law firm, and allegations of an ongoing affair had persisted from the Little Rock days to the White House itself. Vincent Foster had been struggling with the presidential blind trust. Normally a trivial matter, the trust had been delayed for almost 6 months, and the U.S. Trustee's Office was beginning to make noises about it. Foster was also the keeper of the files of the Clintons' Arkansas dealings, and had indicated in a written memo that Whitewater is a can of worms that you should not open.
First off, Whitewater is a can of worms that you should not open.
Should not open. Do you know what the Whitewater situation was over there in Arkansas?
Wasn't it with drug dealings and whatnot, or?
No. This was actually what they alleged to be a scheme with the Clintons. Actually bought property down like some forestry park area. They purchased it with a group of other individuals, and they were basically selling the land to basically the elderly who ended up kind of foreclosing on their payments and unable to make the payments. And so they would basically take over. They would have them sign contracts on like, this is your piece of property, just keep up with the payments. And at the end of your, like any loan, at the end of it, you'll get the property. Well, they were obviously, multiple people were unable to keep up with the payments, and the Clintons continued to take over those properties and just sell them over and over to people, and multiple people just continue to.
So like predatory lending,
basically.
Knowing they couldn't afford the payments to keep up with them, they just
it's kind of one of those things. Yeah, and this is just what we know, right? We don't know what other files that Vincent Foster actually had on him that kind of alluded to even more criminal activity with the Clintons.
Since he's known them for so long.
Yes. So Vincent Foster had a relationship with a friendly relationship with Jerry Parks, who was a private investigator. So he was a private investigator for the Clintons, but Jerry Parks was kind of really entrusted with Jerry Parks, and Jerry Parks actually investigated quite thoroughly into the Clinton and the Whitewater. And so he actually had quite a bit of files on the Clintons. And so the day or two before Foster passed, in his apparent suicide, he actually called Jerry Parks in Arkansas and let him know and told him, "Hey, I'm going to be giving these files to Hillary Clinton." And Parks actually told him, "Hey, it's a bad idea.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Yeah,
Hillary
is not someone to be messed with.
Yes, and she can definitely do some things that you probably would not." Be happy with, and he was like giving him this big warning, like stay away from that because he had a lot of files even before, during, and after Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas, and all the escapades that have happened with Bill Clinton, along with Hillary Clinton, the Whitewater with Bill Clinton, the drug running stuff that was happening. And so he had accumulated all this evidence. Vincent Foster at the Capitol actually had these in a locked safe in his office. Okay. And so the day before,
I read a little bit about that.
Yes.
About his some people going into his office that next day, and correct me if I'm wrong, but these were just regular kind of employees, but that had lockpicking backgrounds.
It gets even more interesting than that. Patsy Hall was actually the individual to go into Foster's office. She was the deputy assistant to the president and deputy director of presidential personnel. She actually knew the Clintons as well back in Arkansas.
Oh, what a surprise.
I actually looked up this woman, and she is now individual. No. She's alive and well. Okay? She is alive and well. She actually works for a group called Ben Barnes Group. And so who are these people? They're just a few people, and this is from their particular website, Ben Barnes Group, Crisis Communication Management. Few people ever notice when a crisis is avoided. Everyone notices when one is mismanaged. And when troublesome issues become public, the result always is costly. We help clients react to and mitigate crisis. We are nimble enough to move quickly and assist with targeted communication and problem resolution. Okay? So this is an individual.
We can make people suicide themselves.
We can make people suicide themselves, and we can twist the truth.
Yeah.
Right? That's basically what I take from this. We can harass people. We can send out miscommunication, misinformation, and we can make this go away.
Yeah, we can cover it up real quick.
Yes. And she is one of the nice, wonderful friends of the Clintons.
Well, it sounds like she's been helping them, so no reason for her to feel so bad enough to kill herself.
Exactly. So I want to go back to Vincent Foster and his death. One of the things from the official report is that his body was found on a hill in a park, laid flat.
Yes.
In a nice, wonderful position.
Yes.
Okay.
Like someone just dropped him.
Like somebody just dropped him. So let's hear from a little bit of the witnesses and some of the EMS people there, because they kind of go into how they found the body, what the exit wounds looked like and what the investigators thought of how this apparent suicide actually looked.
Sergeant George Gonzalez, a lead paramedic for the Fairfax County Fire and Rescue, was one of the first on the scene after responding to a 911 call. Gonzalez, a 13-year veteran, had previously examined a number of suicide victims with gunshot wounds to the head. He was shocked by the obvious lack of blood at the scene, stating, "Usually a suicide by gunshot is a mess." His observations were confirmed by many others who were present, including members of the Park Police. Christopher Ruddy, who at the time was a reporter for the New York Post, had discovered that most of those on the scene that night had never been interviewed, an oversight which he quickly began to correct.
In January of 1994, I went down and met with some of the emergency workers and police that were at the scene that night. And I found out that many of them were surprised about the body and the condition of Mr. Foster's body when they found it. For example, the lead paramedic who was at the scene that night noted that he had never seen a suicide like this, gunshot wound to the head, with so little blood.
Gene Wheaton, retired U.S. Special Agent with the Army's Criminal Investigation Division, has more than 35 years' experience as a homicide investigator. He spent several weeks in Washington investigating the Foster case.
I was hired to specifically go to Washington and make some inquiries into the circumstances surrounding the death of White House legal counsel Vincent Foster. It is my professional opinion, and I've been a homicide investigator for 35, 40 years, that the events surrounding the death were treated in such a cavalier and bizarre manner that it had to have been a cover-up. I have never in my career seen a gunshot wound into the mouth by a suicide that didn't have a tremendous amount of blowback of blood, brains, and tissue, both in the out of the mouth and the nose, the ears, and the back of the skull at the exit wound. It's a very sloppy, gory sight to see. And when a person fires a .38 caliber revolver, which the alleged weapon was, or higher caliber than that, there's a tremendous amount of gases that have no place to go inside the skull cavity, and it just blows everything out. For them to say that there was a very minor amount of blood at the scene, which is what's in the official reports, I find it hard to believe. It doesn't make any professional sense.
The Fisk report attempts to explain away the lack of blood by stating that the bullet contused the left side of the brainstem, causing instantaneous complete incapacitation, including the immediate stopping of the heart and blood flow. Noted California pathologist and gunshot wound expert Dr. Richard Mason disagrees, stating, "Certainly you can have heart activity for a minute or two following brainstem impairment." Page 52 of the Fisk report states, Foster's body was positioned on a steep slope with his head near the top of the berm and his legs extended down the hill. As a result, when his heart stopped beating, gravity permitted the settling of blood into the lower portions of his body rather than out of the wound in his head. This statement contradicts an earlier statement on page 36 where Fisk writes, "At approximately 7:40 p.m., Dr. Donald Hout, the Fairfax County medical examiner, arrived at the scene to examine the body. At that point, Foster's body was rolled over, and those present observed a large pool of blood located on the ground where Foster's head had been. Dr. Hout, who was never interviewed by Fisk, vehemently denies seeing a large pool of blood on the ground." EMS technician Corey Ashford, who placed Foster's remains into a body bag, re-emphasized the lack of blood by stating he couldn't even see an exit wound. This statement led to initial reports that there was no exit wound.
The person that put Foster's body in a body bag later that night, an EMS worker, said that he didn't even have to use rubber gloves. He didn't remember even seeing an exit wound out of the back of Foster's head. And he didn't even have to wash his hands after doing this task.
This important testimony, which further reinforced the lack of blood at the scene, was omitted from the report.
So why would they have to remit all of that from the report? From EMS workers and everything.
Yeah. Well, from the official report, right? What did we hear? He was found on a hill, which later we're going to show our viewers and our listeners. If you're on Spotify, go to YouTube. We're going to actually show the memo the park police sent over to the FBI to show them that that he was initially found in his car. The interesting part is there's just so many inconsistencies with the official report versus
eyewitnesses and people who actually did it.
Eyewitnesses and other reports.
And first off, real quick, I've got a few things I want to go over. George, who went to go investigate, was like, I've seen suicides before. There should be a lot more blood.
Yeah.
With people who are shooting themselves in the head.
Exactly.
Especially a lead paramedic saying that. It doesn't make any sense.
Not only that there's not a lot of blood, but he falls so perfectly on a hill.
Yes.
With his body position in such a perfect position. But one of the other things that I found while researching this, think about that this individual, and this is what I thought was interesting too. He supposedly stuck a .38 caliber revolver in his mouth.
Yes.
Shot himself. The report also doesn't indicate that there was any damage to the mouth. Just imagine, like, I shoot guns. Okay, a .38 special, a .38 caliber revolver. Those things have pretty good recoil onto them.
Yeah.
So,
and I assume there's a lot of hot gases coming out of that giant caliber too.
Yeah. So no damage to the internal portions of his mouth. No, nothing found in his mouth to say that he shot himself and stuck the barrel in his mouth. Okay, because you think about a revolver, it also has that nice little front sight on it.
Yeah.
So
no kickback from like
exactly
chipping his tooth
no chipped tooths, no scratching of his mouth, nothing.
And one thing that intrigued me right there too was the no blowback.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't make any sense to me. And their reports to counteract that was like, oh, the bullet goes and twists around and mangles things around, so you're not going to have it. It's like, what? What about the giant? Like the bullet just hit the brain and then just stopped.
Yeah.
And a bunch of the gases and everything, nothing happened.
So what that tells me is that he didn't only get shot from the front of his face, but somebody shot him in the back of the head as well.
Yeah, no joke.
So if he shot himself, there was like hardly any blood on the ground. You remember the official report? Speckles.
Yes.
I don't know if somebody shot themselves in the head, there wouldn't be just speckles on the ground.
Yeah. The reason being that they said the counteract is because his body was on an incline. So when he shot, everything just kind of pulled to the bottom of his body. They don't worry about it. And so what happens to people who unfortunately decide to do that, who are sitting down?
Yeah.
They're just
so here's the thing.
Cleanest suicide ever.
I've been told of people's suicides, whether it be with a shotgun or with a gun. There is a lot of blood everywhere when people put barrels into their mouths.
Well, there's a lot of blood. You're telling me there's like hardly any blood in your brain?
Yeah. And I mean, even with people getting shot, there's blood splattered. Even if they're not shooting themselves, if somebody shoots them, there's going to be blood splatters. A lot more than just little speckles.
And that's if someone gets shot not in like an artery or anything.
Yeah. So it just
it blows your mind.
And for the commenters out there, I'm not laughing because it's a funny thing. I'm laughing at the absurdity of these,
of just how crazy
this stuff just is able to elude everyone in the public, because
it's official.
The normal person out there, middle class America, does not pay attention to these things and is not aware of all of these things behind the scenes that are going on, even when they're reported. Because most of the time they pay attention to the normal reports and final official reports that come out, and they're not privy to the other unofficial reports and other things that have been told about it. I mean, you literally have an EMS worker that have newspaper articles quoting this individual to say that they've never seen a suicide. Well, or I'm sorry, just because it might be YouTube and not let us use the word suicide. They've never seen a self-inflicted wound that didn't have as much blood coming out.
Well, it's not only that, it's everyone who came in contact with him that's not on, like, that doesn't have a FBI or some kind of tag underneath them. Every single one of them were like, where's all the blood? Where's all the batter? Where's, like, the blowback? Where's anything from, like, a 38 caliber bullet entering the mouth?
All the investigators there, all the other witnesses, including the unfortunate job of the EMS workers who have to actually pick this body up and bag it and take it to the coroners to say that this doesn't look like what it is.
Yeah.
So already we have the park police saying that the body wasn't originally found on the hill. We have investigators saying this doesn't look right.
Yeah. Even a cover up.
And then we have reports of investigators saying that this is a cover up. EMS workers, investigators saying it just doesn't sit right with them that there's no blood and that there was no exit wound.
If you're to go ask anyone too, hey, what kind of area, whether it be outside a room, how do you think someone's head or the surrounding areas would be if they were to shoot themselves?
How would their body land?
Yeah.
In a perfect position, as though
they land perfectly like that,
as though they were standing at attention. That's how his body was found on the ground. But just so much inconsistencies with the official report. But it's inconsistent with the other reports because they omitted it from the report. They didn't include those in the actual official report.
Well, it
because it doesn't fit in with
what they wanted.
But what about the actual witnesses? What about the people that probably who called him? Who called? What do they say?
They probably say, "Oh, it was a suicide? I thought someone killed him."
Yeah. Oh, that's weird. Man, that from what I saw, that is not what happened. But okay, official report from the FBI. What are you going to do? Let's hear from the witnesses.
Patrick, why don't you begin with the day you drove into Fort Marcy Park?
Well, for the listening audience, we are talking about the Vince Foster case, and I was a Whitewater grand jury witness, Howard, as you know. I drove into Fort Marcy Park on July 20th, 1993. What I saw in the park was two cars. I later, that evening, after finding out Mr. Foster was dead, I called the park police, and I told the park police I'd seen these two cars in the parking lot. One car was an old rust brown car with Arkansas license plates, and the other car was a light blue, metallic blue car with a gentleman, a man in the car. That was the end of that. I never heard from the park police again. I never followed the Foster case. I had no idea that, I heard a guy who committed suicide, and I figured that was it. What I saw in the park, this guy acting very suspicious in the blue car, which, made me aware of my surroundings. After I called the park police, that was it. It wasn't until 9 months later, and John may have to intervene here because I get the dates mixed up sometimes, but 9 months later I was contacted by the FBI. FBI took over the investigation with the Fisk investigation. And
Fisk was Ken Starr's predecessor as independent counsel.
That's correct. I was called by them. I was brought into their office. I was interviewed by Larry Monroe and William Columbell, two FBI agents who were assigned to Fisk.
As I recall your story, your account, to put it bluntly, you drove into the park to heed the call of nature.
That's true. That's true.
And you saw a very ominous, threatening kind of fellow there. Who was correct. Looking at you in a threatening way.
Yeah, he. That's what I say. My awareness was brought to its height because this guy made me nervous at first, and so I was, paying close attention to him. There was only two cars in the parking lot in mine, so I remembered very well what
you were
I
there
saw.
at a time that was inconvenient for him, it would seem.
I think so. I was there at 4:30. They found Mr. Foster's body. His body was found at 5:45, so I was there about 70 minutes for the discovery of the body. As I was saying, the FBI then interviewed me, Mr. William Columbell and Larry Monroe, And they wanted to talk about the car that I saw. They were very concerned about this vehicle that I saw, and like I say, I saw an older rust brown Honda. Mr. Monroe showed me these various photographs of a Honda, pictures of a Honda that was taken in the parking lot at the U.S. Park Police headquarters. Not in the park itself, but in the U.S. Park Police headquarters, where they had allegedly parked the car after towing it from Fort Marcy Park. I looked at the pictures. I told Mr. Monroe and Mr. Colombo that wasn't the car I saw in the park.
So in other words, the Park Police had obtained Vince Foster's real car.
The pictures,
it was Vince Foster's car that they had.
I still don't know if it was Vince Foster's car that I saw. I mean, I have no idea.
They represented that what they had was Vince Foster's car.
Right.
But the car that you saw looked very different.
Totally different.
Than what they said was Vince Foster's
Exactly.
car. And they were upset that your story didn't fit their story.
That's true. And so when I got ready to leave after this 2.5-hour FBI interview, Mr. Monroe, Agent Monroe, said to me, "Don't go to the press with this story about the car. It's not good for the Fosters or the president," or something to that effect. And I just said, I didn't plan on it. I never thought about going to the press about anything.
So the FBI told you to keep quiet.
Keep quiet, exactly. So I did keep quiet. And about 3 weeks later, or 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, they called me back in for another interview. And this time they wanted to make sure that I was really sure about the car I saw, this rust brown, color like your table, your desk here. Again, he showed me some pictures. He read me some interviews of the park police who had said they saw a grayish-brown car. And I kept saying, well, the car that I saw was older than the pictures you're showing me. It's a totally different color. Went over to the FBI laboratory. That's where Mr. Frederick Whitehurst had been demoted from bomb expert to a paint expert. And Mr. Whitehurst was in the laboratory. He took me to the paint panel section. I pulled out the panels that fit the color of the car that I saw in Fort Marcy Park, and they fit an 83 or an 84 Honda Accord. And Mr. Foster's car, of course, was an 89 Honda.
89 silver color.
Silver. So in my FBI reports, after I was, I was contracted by Ambrose Evans Pritchard.
Now, who is Mr. Pritchard? I know who he is, but you tell us.
Mr. Pritchard is he was the London bureau chief here in Washington, D.C. for the London Sunday Telegraph.
He was a reputable journalist from the United Kingdom.
That's right, absolutely. And he brought me into his office. He showed me his what he had obtained, or somebody obtained these files from the FBI, the 302s. They're statements that they type up after they take notes of your interview. And I started reading the interview, and the first thing that caught my eye was they said that I saw an 88 to a 90 Honda Accord.
So this is important. The FBI, in their official version, changed your testimony.
Absolutely.
Without your knowledge or permission.
Absolutely. I had no idea what they had changed my story. Actually, then they said that the guy that was in the park, at the time I was being interviewed, they said, "Could you recognize this guy?" And I said, "Well, if you show me a lineup or a photo spread, I could pick the guy out with no problem." Well, in the report, they said I couldn't identify the guy now or any time in the future, which was another fabrication. Then there was many other things all the way through. It was just,
so there was hostility toward you on the part of the people interviewing you.
Yeah, there was hostility when I was being interviewed, but I mean, I just thought it was the nature of the job, and I was nervous anyways. I'd never been called in to be interviewed by the FBI or any agency for that matter. Excuse me. So,
did the park police ever interview you?
No, park police never called. I mean, I initiated the call myself. So,
who was the first journalist to talk to you? Was it Pritchard or someone else?
Yeah, Pritchard was the first.
And what was Pritchard's message? Was he skeptical of you at the beginning?
Yeah, because when I started telling him, we met at a coffee shop, I started telling him the story, and he asked me if I was lying. And I said, lying? What would I be lying about? So that's when I went back to his office. He showed me the reports, and that's when I started saying, well, the FBI's lying. I mean,
so in other words, he had reason to think you were lying because everybody thinks the FBI always tells the truth.
Well, I did.
And their story was different than yours.
Right.
About what you had said.
Right,
and seen.
exactly. So,
but you won this journalist's confidence.
Yes,
and
I
he
did.
figured out that you were telling the truth, and the government of the United States was telling the lies.
That's right. The FBI was definitely misrepresented what I said completely. They lied. I mean, they lied about what I said.
Wow, I'm surprised the FBI lied, guys.
I had full faith in the FBI.
Yeah.
Up until right now, maybe I'm going to start doubting them.
And just to promote our previous video that we did on the FBI, the COINTEL Pro, if you haven't seen that, go back to one of our previous episodes of how we talk about the FBI and what they've done throughout the past to discredit and cause mayhem in the United States.
On purpose.
Yep.
So he called the park police first to go in there. So they go in there first, take all their notes, which, we were looking at before. Man in a blue car, all that normal stuff that, he sticks his story to. But he doesn't hear from anyone after this for 9 months.
9 months.
9 months. A high-ranking person from the federal government, he finds him dead.
Yeah.
And he doesn't hear from anyone for 9 months.
Well, I'm a little suspicious of this guy anyway, because he just decided to go into the park and like take a piss, and he just so happens to see like suspicious things, right? And see and decide to go tell the police about everything that's going on. So it kind of, at the same time, I think he may be a credible witness, but I think his whole situation and how he ended up in that area at the time of this particular event seems a little suspicious to me. However, I don't take away from the fact that the FBI probably lied about the whole situation, right?
And it builds confidence in someone when you get interviewed by the FBI and they're like, hey, don't go to the press about this. It wouldn't look good for anybody. Don't go to the press about the guy killing himself and stuff not being wrong. I mean, stuff being all wrong.
Yeah. And the fact that the FBI, I mean, you can always trust individuals when they say, don't go tell anybody about this.
Yeah. I mean, I can understand if they're like, hey, it's still a homicide investigation. Yeah. But a suicide? Like, why not go? Like, who could get hurt from me saying the information about this stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, if it was a homicide and you didn't want information to get out about the investigation, I can understand that.
Yes.
So it seems like FBI was treating it more like a homicide.
I think so, and I think they wanted to make sure that it didn't come out to be a homicide, and so they changed up all of his accounts of the incident. And so, which brings me to the murder weapon. The self-inflicted weapon.
Yes,
that Mr. Foster had. Okay, allegedly. Okay, and so what was the murder weapon? It was said to have been
self-inflicted gunshot wound weapon.
The self-inflicted weapon was known to be a .38 caliber weapon, a revolver.
Yes,
for most people out there who don't know weapons. Let's look into that. Let's look into what the weapon was and how that was reported, how it was also brought to Vincent Foster's wife. Okay?
Oh, that sounds odd, but okay.
Yeah. For her to identify.
Okay. Yeah.
And so what do we know about the murder weapon?
Self-inflicted gunshot wound weapon, sir.
Weapon, yes. The weapon that was used to self-inflict a death blow wound to itself.
Yes. That's the longest description of it. But yes.
The photo that was taken, the weapon was black. It was a .38 special black revolver that he held in his hand.
The picture we're looking at right now, his hand is just like hovering over it, which is odd from being self-inflicted, but all right. The black .38, I see it clearly.
Yeah. And so when the FBI was actually interviewing Vincent Foster's wife and having her identify the weapon, what they showed her was a silver .38 special revolver.
Not the black one.
Not the black one.
To identify it, right?
To identify, hey, is this your husband's weapon?
Yeah.
Does this belong to Mr.
The
Foster?
actual weapon.
Yes. They were actually showing his weapon to her, which was a silver .38 special. In the picture of evidence, there is a black .38 special revolver.
Yeah. And even the FBI reports, they keep mentioning a silver gun.
Yes. They mention silver constantly, but the actual evidence and picture that they show is actually of a black revolver.
Yes.
So it's very interesting that the whole thing just doesn't make any sense. The official report stated it belonged to Foster or tend to show that it belonged to Foster.
Oh, that's where they get away with it. It tends to show.
Yes.
Like giving them a way out.
Yeah,
a scapegoat.
there goes their backdoor exit right there on that one if anything were to come out.
And all they're going to quote is, she said, yes, that's his gun. She identified his gun.
The other thing is that the bullet that was used was never found. No shell casings or anything. Nothing was found around him. Nothing was in the
Well,
area.
As a revolver, there wouldn't be a shell casing that just falls out, right?
That's true, but the casing itself wasn't
missing.
there.
It was
they didn't have it, so there was nothing there. So if there's one thing,
which is odd, especially now that I think about it, for the bullet casing, because it should have been in there.
It should still be in the gun.
Yeah,
right. So if that's what he actually did to himself, then you would have that to show
everything should be there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So why isn't any of that information in the official report?
What I want to mention is whoever handled this, they did a very sloppy job. I don't know if it was too many cooks in the kitchen or what was going on, but there are so many just bad information and conflicting information. Well, it's just like, you would assume from the FBI, if they're going to allegedly murder someone, that they have their stuff right.
Yeah.
Like have things in order.
The other thing is, the other evidence that they bring up is that his feet had no dirt on him.
From someone walking into a park.
Yes, and all the investigators that walked up to his body and were investigating,
on them.
All of them had dirt piled up on and stuck onto their soles.
Yeah.
He had no dirt on his soles. Nothing, as if, I don't know, what did he just float into the spot?
It's like someone just maybe floated there or maybe placed him there. Well, at least they got that right. They just kind of covered their tracks, but they did it a little too good to where there's still steps for him.
Where was Vincent Foster? With all of the security that happens in the White House, there was no video footage, no log information about him ever leaving the White House. So there was evidence of him coming into the building, but no video footage or logs of him leaving, because obviously you have to log in and out, and there should be video surveillance and things like that. None of which is available or on the official report of how he left the building. So when did this actually happen? Where did it happen?
Why do you want all that information?
Why
guy just walked out and just, self-inflicted gunshot wound himself.
So here's some more interesting information. After his death, that was reported as a suicide. No suicide note was found.
Yeah.
Okay. Until multiple days later.
Yeah, when it was weird that someone like that wouldn't leave a suicide note.
Yeah.
And then what I've read into a little bit is that there's none of his fingerprints anywhere on that suicide letter.
Not only that, is that they actually looked into his briefcase prior
and didn't find it.
Didn't find anything.
And
that's exactly where they found his suicide note.
Days later.
Then it was reported, and there's an actual article in 1996 that states Hillary Clinton's fingerprints among those found on papers.
Well, they were friends and possibly traded notes. So she was like, "Hey, have these blank pieces of paper in your briefcase hidden somewhere good, please."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Sure, I'll take those blank pieces of paper and put them in my briefcase."
Yeah. So her fingerprints were on that, but also in the article, I'm just reading off an article that's actually from that time.
CNN time.
Yes. So there was a memo linked the First Lady at the time, which was Hillary Clinton, to handling of the suicide note. Why would she have her fingerprints? Why would she be handling a suicide note
at all? The current First Lady.
Yes. At the time.
Maybe she wanted to see what her alleged friend wrote.
He was depressed, unhappy. His job was so stressful that he made it that far all the way to the White House and decided, you know what, this is the end for me. So the suicide note was sent for authentication that Foster wrote it. What they found is that it was not
his handwriting.
There was a lot of inconsistencies with the letter.
The note they found in his briefcase 3 days later, after already searching it, wasn't his handwriting?
It was not.
That's actually pretty crazy. Now I'm starting to wonder, hey, did this guy actually gunshot self and whatever the term is?
So for all of our listeners, for all of our viewers, let us know what you think about that. Comment, like, subscribe.
I want to point out real quick, we do cut this down quite a bit for YouTube. So if you want to hear a little more raw, podcasts, we're everywhere on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. So if you want to hear a longer, more raw version of it, feel free to search us up, Far Out Dudes.
So like, subscribe, share with your friends, listen to us on Rumble, YouTube, Spotify, and anywhere you can find podcasts.
And don't forget, if you have a subject or story you want us to look into, just leave a comment or send us an email about it. This is the end.